right, so today we're going to look at the actual chronology of Revelation chapter 11. And what I've done here is I've given you another handout, and it shows the order of events of how things actually are going to happen chronologically speaking from Revelation 11. And then what I've done is I've actually inserted the events from Revelation 11 where they would go in the timeline that we have, the basic framework from Revelation chapter 12. And if you don't know what the basic framework for the timeline of the end times is according to Revelation chapter 12, which has the whole time frame in it, go back to the very first video in this series and watch that. I think it'll give you a lot of insight about how to look at Revelation. So we know that Revelation is not written in chronological order. It's a series of visions, and even each vision is not in chronological order. For example, when we look at Revelation chapter 11, the very first 3 verses are not in chronological order. John is given a measuring rod like a staff and is told, "Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there, but don't measure the outer court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it's given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months." So in these 2 verses here, we have basically the time frame from when the temple is built until the end of the 42-month reign of the beast. Okay, that pretty much encompasses most of the events of Revelation are going to be between the time the temple is built and the time of the end of the 42 months. Okay, so we've got basically the whole time frame right there in 2 verses. And then it says that God's going to grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they'll prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. And we know from other things that we've read that these are going to be the people who rebuild the temple. So here the builders of the temple are being listed after the temple's built. People are worshiping there. The holy city is trampled for 42 months, and now we know that the people who are going to be building the temple are going to minister for 1,260 days. Well, on a timeline, we would actually start the ministry of the 2 witnesses first, okay, and then they build the temple, then the temple is measured, and then the city is trampled for 42 months. Okay, that's how it goes chronologically, but it's not presented to us in a chronological way. It still is in a very orderly sequence according to thoughts. When God wants to talk about his 2 witnesses ministering for 1,260 days, then he talks about how the 2 olive trees, the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of all the earth, and so on and so forth. And now he goes into talking about them personally. The temple part is in the first 2 verses, and the temple is going to stand, and then it's going to be trampled by the Gentiles for 42 months. Now we're going to talk about the 2 witnesses. They're going to minister for 1,260 days. They're going to build the temple. They're going to be there present with the worshipers. They are the ones who are going to restore the hearts of fathers to the children and children to the fathers, basically bringing them back to center with regard to God's plan of redemption through Christ. We know that the 2 witnesses have power to turn waters to blood and power to cause a drought for 3.5 years. And what that does now is it connects us to Elijah and Moses. That's how we know who the 2 witnesses are going to be. And then it talks about how they have power to come against anyone who comes against them. They have power to kill anyone who comes against them. And we know that the beast is going to die and he's going to ascend. And the 2 witnesses are the ones who have the power to kill the beast. And then we read about how the beast ascends from the bottomless pit. We know that Apollyon's in the bottomless pit. He's going to ascend from there. And we also know that the 7th king is going to be killed and come back as the 8th king, who is the beast from the sea, who is actually given all of Satan's power, throne, and very great authority when he rises from the dead. So what we see here actually is a combination of the beast from the sea, the 7th king, being resurrected at the same time that Apollyon ascends from the bottomless pit and actually goes into this resurrected person. The beast makes war on the two witnesses. Actually, they've been at war. There's been a war in heaven that's been going on for about 10 days. And there's this war between the seventh king and the two witnesses. At first, it looks like the two witnesses are the winners because they kill the beast. They kill the seventh king, the scarlet beast. And then the beast rises from the dead after Satan is cast out of heaven and gives his power to his false son. And then he kills the two witnesses. Okay, well, now the two witnesses lie dead for 3.5 days, and then they resurrect and ascend into heaven. This is a very shocking turn of events. The people who've been the earth dwellers have been rejoicing over this, that the witnesses are dead, because I think a lot of people are going to believe that the two witnesses are actually the false prophet and the beast who are doing all these bad things against people. And remember, the two witnesses are going to be doling out plagues at the same time that the seals and the first 5 trumpets are going to be coming into play. So a lot of blame is going to be attached to these two people. So everybody's going to be glad when they're dead. They resurrect, and then at the same hour that they ascend, this is the hour of the second woe. And remember, the second woe only lasts an hour. It's 1 hour long. The second woe is the sixth trumpet. And if you go to Revelation 9, you can read about the sixth trumpet is on a single hour, day, month, and year that's already been put in God's calendar. He already knows when he's going to do this. This is already established. And at that same hour, they went up into heaven. There was and their enemies watched them. There was a great earthquake. 1/10 of the city fell, and 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake. The rest were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe has passed. How could it have passed? Because it's only 1 hour long. That's how it could have passed. The sixth trumpet is 1 hour. And then it talks about how the third woe is soon to come. Okay, so if we were to put this on a timeline with the events of Revelation chapter 12. So the very first event is the Revelation 12 sign. And to me, that was the indicator that we should be looking at Revelation chapter 12. That's the starting place. Don't start at Revelation 1. Start at Revelation 12, where we see the very first indicator that we're actually in the book of Revelation. Okay, so there's been about 4.5 years or so as of the time I'm doing this video since the Revelation 12 sign. And we know Israel has 3.5 years of great tribulation. And so if we were to take the time from the Revelation 12 sign and then include the 3.5 years of the great tribulation for the Jews, what we end up with is 4.5 plus 3.5. Well, we end up at 8 years. Okay, and so we've already passed what people would consider the amount of time for a 7-year tribulation. I've talked about how long the tribulation is. So the length of time that we know for sure is the 42-month reign of the beast. It's that last 3.5 years of Daniel's 70th week, that 7-year period of time. Jesus fulfilled the first 3.5 years of that 70th week of 7 years. That's spoken of in Daniel chapter 9. And there's only 3.5 years left to go. That's the last half of Daniel's 70th week. They only have 3.5 years left. And there is birth pangs that happen before the abomination of desolation takes place. And the birth pangs only last about 6 months. And the time between when the Revelation 12 sign happens and when the woman actually goes into travail, that is, Israel is actually invaded, so far is about 4.5 years, but I think it'll either be in the fall of 2022 or the fall of 2023 when that war or invasion actually takes place. That's my opinion. That's my thinking about it. Okay, so the next thing that happens is the two witnesses began their 1,260-day ministry. We don't know exactly when that started. We don't need to know. We know that they're going to be ministering to Israel, to either the people who are going to become among the 144,000 of Israel or the remnant of Israel who is going to be fleeing into the wilderness. We know that once the war starts, that's when the temple will begin to be rebuilt. And it's very possible that that could happen actually on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, possibly this fall. The woman will be in travail, and basically all of this is happening at the same time. So the temple is being constructed by the two witnesses. Israel is being invaded. Satan is on the earth along with a third of his angels. Okay, all of that's happening all at once. And then the child is born. That is, believers are made manifest as being the sons of God. And during that time, there's going to be a 7-day period, because when you have a male child, you know you're going to have 7 days with an 8th day when they are going to be presented to God. Satan is going to attempt to devour us as believers, but we're going to be caught up to God and to his throne on the 8th day. It's also on the 8th day that the temple is finished. It's the final measurements of the temple are taken. The 144,000 are present as worshipers. We know that sometime shortly after that, the pit will be opened, allowing the beast who ascends from the bottomless pit to be available to leave the pit and go into the beast who rises from the sea. Okay, we've talked about that in the video that I did on Revelation 11 and 13, where I combined those together so you could see how those events matched up. The two witnesses are going to protect their ministry, which is the reason why they're given power to do any plagues. They have a ministry to protect the 144,000, the remnant of Israel, the tabernacle that they've set up. I don't know what all, but they are going to be able to come against anyone who comes against them. And eventually, I think that the 7th king is going to come against the two witnesses. The 7th king is the same entity as the scarlet beast. Okay, the scarlet beast is going to die. The 7th king is going to die, going to be resurrected as the 8th king, and the beast who ascends from the bottomless pit, that entity Apollyon, is going to indwell this 7th king, now become 8th king, and it's going to be a hybrid being. And then on the day that the beast rises from the dead, or ascends from the bottomless pit, that's the same day that the two witnesses are killed. The two witnesses are protecting their ministry. They kill the beast. And at the same time, there's going to be believers who are being martyred, okay? This is not the child who's already been caught up to God. This is another group of people who have become believers, and they are going to be martyred, and they're the 5th seal martyrs that we see in heaven. This happens before, basically, the abomination takes place. Believers are martyred. They're already present in heaven when Satan is cast out of heaven. When there's that war in heaven and Satan is finally cast out. And the day that Satan is cast out of heaven, that's the same day that Apollyon rises from the pit to indwell the beast. This hybrid beast then kills the two witnesses. And of course, in heaven, there's rejoicing because Satan has been cast out, but there's woe on the earth because he's come down. After the beast who ascends from the bottomless pit, beast from the sea, kills the two witnesses, there is this rejoicing on earth for 3.5 days. Revelation 13 tells us, that people say, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? Obviously, the two witnesses can't, because they are now dead after they had killed the beast and he rose from the dead. So the two witnesses lie unburied for 3.5 days. This is a way of desecrating their bodies by not allowing their bodies to rest in a tomb or a grave. And all the earth dwellers are celebrating for these 3.5 days, but then the two witnesses are resurrected. The breath of life from God comes into them, and they ascend into a cloud. And at that same hour, there's an earthquake. Okay, this is the time of the second woe, the sixth trumpet. That hour, the woman is going to flee into the wilderness for 1,260 days. The dragon is going to pursue the woman with a flood of an army or troops. The woman is given these eagle's wings to flee from the serpent. The earth that's opened up, allowing this group to flee through the opening in the mountain. That opening is going to close up, and it's going to swallow the flood, that army of the dragon. The woman, the remnant, will be in the wilderness for 1,260 days while Satan makes war on believers. At that same hour that there's this great earthquake that this remnant is going to flee through, 1/10 of the city of Jerusalem will fall, 7,000 people will die, and that then begins the beginning of Jerusalem being trampled by the Gentiles for 42 months. Okay, so that's sort of the order of events that we see when we combine Revelation 11 with the events in Revelation 12. Now, later on, if I get ambitious, I may insert the events from Revelation 13 into this timeline as well. And it's quite possible that eventually we could end up with a whole long timeline that is derived from the various visions that we see in Revelation. And once we put each vision in chronological order, we can connect them in places where they actually connect. So the beast who ascends from the bottomless pit is the same guy as the beast who rises from the sea. That's the same entity. So we know that the beast will rise from the sea of death, be given Satan's power, throne, and great authority on the same day that we see the beast that ascends from the abyss or bottomless pit. Okay, and then we meet those two events up, and we know that it's this entity who then kills the two witnesses, and there's 3.5 days, and then there's the second woe. Okay, second woe is the sixth trumpet. We know the sixth trumpet is the destruction of the harlot on a single hour, day, month, and year. So that's how we make a lot of these connections here. So what I've done is I basically started with Revelation 12, and then I did 11 and 13 and combined them together. And then I did 14, 15, and 16 that have to do with the events that are primarily concerned with what happens after the sixth trumpet, after, okay, the abomination of desolation is that same day as the sixth trumpet. And now we're kind of working the other direction, the things that happen before the sixth trumpet. So we're not dealing with a 7-year tribulation. What we're dealing with is a 3.5-year, 42-month reign of the beast, the time of great tribulation for the Jews, and then the events that immediately precede that, about 6 months, okay, from the time of basically when the two witnesses begin to rebuild the temple, which is about the same time that the war in Israel is going to take place. And there's about 6 months between that and when the beast will begin his reign of 42 months or 3.5 years. I hope you'll get the handout here where I insert these events into a timeline so you can see sort of how all this stuff unfolds. And I'll be doing more of this, and I think probably in the next video in the series I'll be doing Revelation chapter 10, which is the chapter that happens on the 8th day, the day that the child is caught up to God and to his throne. And there are a lot of events that are going to occur on the 8th day. And there's many chapters in Revelation that are actually devoted to the events that take place on the 8th day, the day that we're caught up to God's throne room, the day that we're raptured. There's a lot of things that are going to happen, and we'll be looking at some of those things on a future video. So I hope you'll leave a comment. I hope you'll give me a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I know that a lot of the things that I say are not typical and don't necessarily follow what people call the party line, but my goal is to interpret Revelation the way I see it and just present it to you, so you can do with it whatever you will. So we'll see you on the next video. Till then, have a blessed day.